started, I mean, Amnesty's work on enforced disappearances started in the context of the War on Terror. And following 2001, we issued about 2 or 3 reports, but then our work started in earnest in 2006, and we issued 3 reports on enforced disappearances, so it's been going on for a long time. We've had some small wins through our pressure, and also not just our pressure, but the pressure of other human rights groups around the world, and also internal groups within Pakistan. When the civilian government was sworn in, it for the first time publicly acknowledged that the practice of enforced disappearance was a practice in Pakistan. Prior to that, Musharraf just said, these disappeared people have just gone on jihad. That was his excuse for the practice. And we've managed to also engage bar associations to condemn the former government for the removal of the judges from service and the practice of enforced disappearance. And we also managed to link the issue of enforced disappearance to the need for an independent judiciary in Pakistan. And I think through our campaigning efforts and the efforts of others, we managed to ensure that those judges who were deposed during the state of emergency were returned to service. And we've also managed to keep the issue in the media as well. In terms of any kind of concrete releases, we're looking to the momentum that occurred between 2006 and 2007, when the Supreme Court managed to secure the release of about 100 people. And we were hoping that the Supreme Court was going to continue with its efforts once Justice Chowdhury was re-elected, but sadly the cases have been transferred to this Judicial Commission that is manifestly weak in terms of its mandate.
Can I ask, do you have any data how many people so far have been disappeared, and among those, how many have been killed?
Given the nature of enforced disappearances, that they're clandestine in nature and they're shrouded in secrecy, so it's very difficult to garner accurate figures. Currently now, the Judicial Commission is hearing about 200 cases. Baloch groups say that 1,100 people remain disappeared, but others will say that those figures are only just a fraction of the problem, and that there are something like 8,000 people who have been disappeared. Not so long ago, the Pakistan government said that they had the names of some 800 Baloch missing persons.
And deaths of people?
I don't have figures of deaths, but we did a press release recently on Balochistan that recorded the deaths of over 40 people in the past 4 months. It's interesting with Balochistan, because what's happening is that normally people would be abducted and picked up and disappeared. But now what's happening is a very sinister practice of kill and dump, where those who have been abducted, their bodies have been recovered across Balochistan, riddled with bullets and torture marks.
Yeah, in regard to the activities of Amnesty International, I'm sure they've done quite a lot of work. But in regards to Balochistan, when you compare it to like that, the proportion of the population of Balochistan, both in eastern Balochistan and western Balochistan, and you compare it that what happened in Chile, I mean, there is no comparison in terms of the number of people disappeared, according to government's own official statistics. In 2000, it was 2005 or 2006, I can't remember, but we got the data. According to the Pakistani-owned minister, they said, look, we've got more than 4,000 of Baloch people in all detention, in the prison, basically. And none of them really being released. It was 2005 or 6, and since then, there have been a lot of people being abducted and being killed. Now, what's the position of Amnesty International when it comes specifically with those black holes, when you've got like countries, or like artificial countries like Iran or Pakistan, when they manipulate one region and they control it in such a way that they create a black hole, and all the information basically you get is through the establishment. Establishment by establishment, well, I don't mean the establishment, the government, establishment, I mean those people, even they regard themselves as human rights or human rights activists or Democrats. The information even you get from those are part of the establishment because they want the existing status quo. If they want this existing status quo, of course they are not going to get much information regarding that.
With regard to figures, we wouldn't go to one source just for figures. We'd go to a variety of sources. In the case of enforced disappearances, it's very difficult to have one overall figure, and we'll always give a range of the numbers of people who have been subjected to this practice because it's just too difficult. The very nature of disappearances are shrouded in secrecy. They're done in a clandestine manner, so it's very difficult to determine the exact numbers, but we certainly wouldn't just go, we wouldn't just quote figures of the government.
Yeah, but how about, my question is, how about people on the ground? Have you done anything, like in terms of commission, sending someone, or I don't know, I'm sure you know much better, to Balochistan?
No, in terms of our work on Balochistan, as I said before, I'm here to address the gap and to find out more about the violations in Balochistan. We've done some work, but we as an organisation realise that it's not enough, and that's why I'm attending this conference.
Thank you. Any other questions? Thank you very much indeed. I'd like now to ask Carlos Zurituza to join us. Carlos is a Spanish journalist and he is winner of the Shahid Nawab Akbar Khan Bukti Award.
Thank you very much.
Give you the floor.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Thank you very much to all of you for coming. I'd like to thank also the International Voice for Baloch Missing Persons and the International Humanist and Ethical Union for inviting me. Well, the purpose of my being here today is that, well, I think as a journalist, as a freelance journalist, I've been covering the so-called under the radar conflicts, like you mentioned before, black holes around the Caucasus region, the Middle East, and more recently Central Asia, very much the Baloch issue. Mr. Kashkolali was also supposed to come to this meeting. It's a real pity that he's in here with us, because I had the pleasure of meeting him last year at his residence in Quetta. It was just a few weeks after he had witnessed the kidnapping of 3 of his clients from his office. A few days later, the corpses were found in the middle of the desert. Mr. Ali briefed me on those facts during an interview in full detail, the same way he would do afterwards with anyone who showed any interest in those terrible events. The consequences of his bold struggle to denounce that outrageous episode are surely known by everybody here. A few months ago, like somebody mentioned before, Mr. Ali had to abandon his native Balochistan to seek refuge in Europe. Mr. Ali and many of the people present here today cannot go back to Balochistan because of the obvious threat to their lives. But neither can I. I conducted the journalistic work in an area whose access is banned to foreign journalists by both Islamabad and Tehran. That's my crime. Unsurprisingly, lawyers like Mr. Kashkolali or like Mr. Mike Nichols, very likely, activists like Ahmar Mustihan, one of the organizers of this event, he's not here right now, or journalists like myself belong today to the ever-growing group of undesirable people for both Iran and Pakistan. I hope there's no misunderstanding here. I'm not attempting by no means to draw any parallel between the situation of these friends and my own. I'm simply pointing out the terrible circumstances that have made possible this meeting today. In fact, the differences between us are doubtless abysmal. I'll go back home after this conference, and many of you here simply won't. It's as simple as that. The organizers of this event asked me if I could talk about my personal experience as a journalist in Balochistan, so I'll go straight to the point. I was lucky enough to step on Balochistan again just a few weeks ago, this time in the North Balochistan region under control of Afghanistan. Before travelling to the southern provinces of Helmand and Nimruz, I had the chance to meet several colleagues in Kabul who had travelled to Afghanistan in order to cover the last parliamentary elections in the country. Many of them were foreign correspondents based in Pakistan, in Islamabad, who had already spent several years in the country, in Pakistan I mean. However, it came as no surprise to me that none of them, and I repeat, none, had ever visited East Balochistan. All of these colleagues told me that they'd love to travel to Quetta and surroundings, but that they couldn't because Islamabad did not give them permission to do so. If they did, they said, they would be deported, never to set foot in Pakistan again. After my first trip to Balochistan last year, I pitched my material to different media, which I thought to be serious and rigorous. The most recurrent answer was, "Thank you, but we already have a correspondent in Pakistan." Yes, a correspondent in Islamabad who will never set foot in Balochistan for fear of being deported, or even worse. And I'm now thinking of Carlota Gal, a very reputed journalist working for one of the biggest newspapers in the world, the New York Times. She was badly beaten in Quetta by men who identified themselves as members of a special branch of the Pakistani police, and who accused her of being in Quetta without permission. This was reported by Carlota Gal herself. In short, everything suggests that Balochistan will remain a province where a well-planned slow-motion genocide is being inflicted to the local population, and where there is no foreign media to report. Assuming that either Pakistan or Iran would grant me a visa at some point, going back to Balochistan would mean putting my own life at risk, and what's more, the lives of those who helped me in this new endeavour. I always try not to forget that I am able to leave a conflict region, but those fixers, translators, or simply local friends have to stay. It will be years before I can even dream of meeting my friends in Quetta, Huzdar, Iranshar, and Zaira. Unfortunately, the limitations for foreign journalists in neighbouring Iran hardly differ from those in Pakistan. No foreign correspondents can travel to the forbidden Iranian regions of Kurdistan or Balochistan, for the very same reasons attached to Pakistan. Surprisingly enough, I have recently confirmed that the most accessible Baloch region for a foreign journalist like myself is the one that lies within the borders of Afghanistan. I face no obstacles, nor any kind of threat by the Afghan government over travelling to the southern provinces of Helmand and Nimruz, where there is a significant Baloch population. I had total freedom to interview, among others, Baloch intellectuals in Kabul, or even the very governor of the Nimruz region, who happens to be a Baloch himself. Unlike Tehran and Islamabad, Kabul has not threatened to deport me. Neither have they prevented me from visiting Afghanistan again in the future, in case I attempted to report on the situation of the Baloch in